So, I mean, moving to sort of mixing as well, I guess is mixing, I would assume mixing would be much easier remotely.
Big time. The only downfall with mixing is that you're not, so for mixed reviews, we're not in the studio with, the client. We're not in there with the director or producer. So the one thing that I found that hasn't worked with remote working for mixing is schedules are the same and they haven't allowed that little bit of extra time, because now what we have to do is we have to do our final mix, send a QuickTime copy off to the client so they can listen to it on their laptop, or if possible, they can go into a proper room within a facility and watch the mix by themselves, and then send back notes. And then I have to do my notes at home and then send back another version. And that back and forth hasn't really been accommodated for. So the schedules are still the same pre-lockdown when we were all in a facility working together, whereas actually a couple of extra hours need to be added on to allow for that back and forth. But otherwise, I mean, it's been great. I've done, I think, 3 or 4 shows now in lockdown where it's been remote mixing. Not an issue. It's all been great. I still get the same amount of notes back as if I was in the studio with the clients. Thankfully, it's all been clients that I know. If I have to work with someone new, that's going to be the tricky part, because like we actually said when we started on this, phone call, I can't see them. I can't see what their reaction is when they're watching the show and when they're listening to it. And I can't gauge what they really want just by email. So it's always really difficult. I'm missing that human interaction that makes our job so much easier. And obviously that's not going to happen for a while. So yeah, mixing is definitely easier than ADR, but it also has its downfalls in that, I've lost the ability to gauge people's reactions.
Yeah, and that's so important. I think people forget that
Yeah.
as soon as someone walks in a room, you kind of pick up on their energy.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of your cues from that, not necessarily what they're saying. It's their body language, their facial expressions. It's all of that. Yeah. But so let's go back. So the process of sort of the dubbing mixer. What is that? So just take me through that a little bit.
So it's my responsibility to take the dialogue, sound effects, music, and if there's Foley, and balance them all together. So usually I'm trying to meet technical requirements depending on where it's going. So if it's for Netflix, they have a specific tech spec that you have to meet. So they have to be, last time I checked, was minus 27 LU loudness. Whereas if you go to somewhere like the BBC, that's minus 23 plus or minus 0.5 loudness. So we have to know our tech specs for whatever channel we're delivering to. I'm doing a series for Channel News Asia at the moment, and their delivery specs is very particular in that they like to have, so usually I'd give a dialogue, music, effects stem, a final mix stem, a M&E stem, and a mix minus narration stem. Channel News Asia also wants an additional atmosphere stem. So it meant, it's a tiny little thing, but it meant reconfiguring my template ever so slightly to accommodate for them. If you go to, I think it's Discovery in the States, their requirements for deliverables is even more specific, and they don't like certain dialogue on the dialogue stem, and they have to get it in a separate stem. And yeah, so as the dubbing mixer, you have a creative process, which is balancing all your elements together and adding on the reverbs and effects and making everything sound natural and nice, and judging if it's a mix that needs to be, big and explosive, or if it's gentle. And, for the documentary, is it just going to be very, very subtle mix, let the dialogue do all the speaking and then everything else just gentle under it? So you have that side, but then you also have the technical side of knowing what you need to deliver, where it's going to, what are they going to need at the very end. So yeah, it's kind of like two different sides of your brain that have to work together. And
right.
If I haven't had enough coffee, that goes out the fucking window.
What would you say is the most challenging thing about being a dubbing mixer?
Probably dealing with the different personalities. Most of the time, you don't just have a director in the room, you have a director and a producer. So it's trying to, if the director and producer aren't agreeing on how they want the show to sound, you have to play the middle person, and you have to try and gauge how you're going to tackle that situation without annoying one or the other. So that is probably the most difficult part. It's not about the technical process at all, or the creative process. It's about the personalities. Like I said, most of this job is psychology. It's about your personality and how you deal with people. The technical part you can get hands down, but it's the learning your people skills is the trickiest. I've got a job coming up at the moment, and the director has asked me to do one thing, and the producer literally just sent me an email contradicting everything the director has asked me to do. And she's done it so that she sent it to me privately, so the director doesn't know that she's contradicted everything she's done. So I'm now in a position where I'm like, well, I can either bugger off this project and say I'm not getting involved in this, or I basically play psychiatrist to both of them and say, okay, well, you want this way, you want this that way. Where can we find a compromise that will keep everybody happy? And that's the best approach you can take. And sure enough, someone is going to end up annoyed at the end that they didn't get their way completely. But it comes back to what I said earlier about what I learned at Pulse. It's about teamwork, and everybody has to just compromise. And I suppose with dubbing mixing as well, one of the biggest things is that a lot of dubbing mixers go in and make the mistake of thinking that it's their sound mix. It's, the way that they have done it is correct. It's not. That project is not your baby. It is the directors and producers. They have worked hard on it for probably 2-3 years. You've worked on it for probably 2-3 days. That's it. If it's a documentary anyways. If it's feature film, you'll have a bit longer, but either way, that's not your mix. It's theirs. So you are there to facilitate their vision. And if their vision doesn't, match up to what yours was, tough. Yours goes out the window. You were there to make them happy. You were there to, the dubbing stage is the final stage of the process. It's where all of their hard work and all of their efforts come together, and they finally get to see the project that they've been working on come to life. And you're there to help that. You're not there to start arguing with them and saying, no, this is wrong. That's going to sound terrible. I don't like the sound of that. That's not how it's usually done. You're there to say, yeah, no bother. Let's give it a shot. Let's see if it works. And if it doesn't, we'll try something else. And that's it.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
And what would you say what would you enjoy the most about sort of that process, the dubbing mixing process?
Actually, probably the same thing. It's dealing with people. I like, one of my least favorite jobs is actually sound editing. I do it because I'm freelance and I got to pay the bills, and sometimes it can be really enjoyable. But the reason I don't like sound editing is because I'm in a room by myself and I've no human interaction. Whereas with ADR and dubbing, I get to be around people, I get to interact with people, I get to collaborate. We get to bounce ideas off each other, and I love that. I love that process so much. And it's been one of the downfalls of remote working, like we said, is that that's gone now. We're not in a room together, we're not interacting, and you can feel it. You can feel that the collaborative process has kind of suffered a little bit. So I'm really looking forward to us all getting back into studios together when it's safe to do so, and getting back to that normality.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can't bloody wait, actually. So one last thing, what would you say, I guess, what are the most important skills needed sort of going into sort of ADR and dubbing mixing? And I guess what advice would you give someone going into post-production sound?
Be patient is the biggest thing. Both as an engineer, so with clients, be patient, be respectful, but also be patient in trying to progress. It's one of the biggest things. I have feck all patience when it comes to my career, and I have had to learn that the hard way. the industry still has a lot of flaws. You know, there's still nepotism going on. There's still, you know, who you know gets you in the door, and it is frustrating as hell. And I hate seeing it. There are changes coming about, but you have to be patient, and you have to be persistent. Like, if someone tells you no, then don't give up. Just keep on going for it, because you will get your opportunity. It might take a little bit longer, but you will get there. The perseverance pays off. The other thing I'd also say is just your attitude. Like I said, when I started out, my attitude was so bad. Just remember to be, you know, don't be arrogant. Come in with an open mind and be willing to learn from people who've been doing it a lot longer than you, because they are going to impart wisdom onto you that you wouldn't have expected, you wouldn't have even known about, because you cannot learn everything in a university course. There are still so many other things that you're going to learn once you get out into the working world, because this industry and the technology is constantly changing. There's constantly new updates, there's constantly new plugins that you need to learn about. So yeah, that's another thing, is just stay open-minded and be willing to learn. And I guess do your research. It's one of the biggest things that I see young students say to me is, oh, well, can you tell me who to get in touch with? And I kind of always feel like saying, no, I can't. When I came over here, I didn't have anybody to tell me, you know, who to get in touch with. I went onto LinkedIn. I searched people. I searched for all of the heads of audios and all of the different companies. I did a search of all the post-production facilities in the UK. I did a search of all of the post-production supervisors, like everybody. And I tracked down their emails, or I found ways to contact them, and I contacted them. And that's what you need to do. You need to be able to do your research. You can't rely on someone else doing it for you.
That's great advice.
I always feel like an old nagging aunt when I say it. But it's, you know, it's the advice that I was kind of given. My old MD and one of the guys who was really a big mentor to me in Dublin, if I used to ask a question that I could easily find out myself, they'd literally turn around to me and say, I'm not telling you, go look it up. And it was great, because I had to go look it up and I had to go learn it. Or if I asked them a question about something that they had already told me the information to, they'd be like, I told you that 2 weeks ago, you should remember it. Or if you don't remember it, write it down so you know that you have it for next time. And at the time I was like, fecking, you know, sods, like feck them. But actually now looking back on it, I was like, that's the best thing they could have done for me, because they are never, like, they're not always going to be there for me. There are going to be times where I'm by myself and I need to think on my feet and I need to know this information, you know, straight away. And I can't just, you know, rely on them to be around to answer my message if I'm in a panic. So yeah, it's definitely one thing that I learned the hard way, but it was really beneficial.
Well, thank you very much, Emma. This has been actually amazing. So thank you very much for all the information.